Good evening, everybody. My name's John Halsey. I'm the Professor of Rural Education Communities at Flinders University. The position is one supported by the Sidney Myer Fund and Myer Foundation, and of course in collaboration with Flinders University. It's my very real pleasure tonight to welcome you here for the third Sidney Myer Rural Lecture. As you know, we live in a huge piece of dirt. Four federal politicians represent more landmass than all of India and Indonesia put together. I just can't get my head around that, but we're not here to talk about things like that. So anyhow, before any further ado, as part of the formal opening of the evening, I'd like to introduce to you Harold Ferber, who is the Deputy Chair of this organisation, and Harold has traditional affiliations with Alice Springs and surrounding areas, but grew up on the Croker Island mission. He attended high schools in Darwin and Adelaide and gained a BA in Administration Public Policy from the University of Canberra in 1994 and a diploma in Social Work and Community Development from the South Australian Institute of Technology. He also completed a trade certificate, and part of his fame, you might have heard of the name if you haven't met him before, he played football for the North Adelaide Football Club in the South Australian National Football League competition. Extensive knowledge working with government and NGOs, and I said a range of prestigious and significant appointments, such as the Chair of the Desert Knowledge Precinct, Chairman of the Desert People's Centre, Board Director, Desert Knowledge Cooperative Research Centre, Chairperson of the Desert DKCRC's Intellectual Property and Ethics Committee. He's a Board Director of NINTI 1, Deputy Chair of Desert Knowledge Australia. And also he's the Council Member for the Vice-Chancellor's Indigenous Advisory Council for Charles Darwin University. A suite of prestigious and influential positions. So without any further ado, Harold, thank you very much for attending tonight, and I look forward to your welcome to all of us to this place.
Yes, thanks, John. And the things you're reading out sort of look pretty impressive. There's one thing I'm not. I'm not the deputy chair of NINTI 1. I'm actually a board member, and NINTI 1 is, I understand, the partner organisation here tonight. So I can't claim to be deputy chair. I'm a board member. That's fine. So I welcome you all here on behalf of families from Central Australia, Aranda people. We've done a lot of work to get this precinct up. The design and a lot of the work was done by Aboriginal people themselves, working in cooperation with the Northern Territory Government. And that's, I'm glad to be able to welcome you all here to this precinct. This discussion tonight, I believe, encapsulates the work we're trying to do here. And I'd like to thank the organisers for choosing to come here and have this evening. The Flinders University and NINTI 1 and the Sidney Myer Lecture. It's quite a prestigious organisation, Sidney Myers, and it's great to have you here and have this presentation and discussion. We are in the centre of a fairly large continent, and these sort of activities give heart to us here, that people will come from long distance to come here to engage in debate, discussion, intellectual information, discussion, sharing of knowledge. So what I did do here is just to try to explain a little bit about what we're trying to do here is I did a 2.5 minute video, and if I can get Charity to just give us a hand how to play it. So I think that, so on behalf of the families, I'd like to welcome you all here, and I'll just show this little video about what we are trying to do here and the extent of it. Thanks, Charity. Hello, my name's Harold Ferber, and welcome to the Desert Knowledge Precinct. The Desert Knowledge Precinct is a 73-hectare site in Alice Springs, bringing together Aboriginal and other knowledge, and is the home to a number of organisations working on their own and together to create a knowledge community, campus or centre of excellence. This knowledge community includes science and research capabilities, education and training opportunities, and ways of bringing people and expertise together. This site has been planned and developed to take into consideration and acknowledge the successful native title claim in Alice Springs by the Yarrandah people through an Indigenous land use agreement. The land use agreement was signed by representatives from the native title group, Luratipa, the Central Land Council, the Northern Territory Government, and Desert Knowledge Australia. Bachelor Institute of Indigenous Tertiary Education is Australia's only dedicated Indigenous dual sector education provider. The Centre for Appropriate Technology is a national science and technology Indigenous non-profit organisation that aims to secure sustainable livelihoods through appropriate technologies. The Desert People Centre is a joint venture between Bachelor Institute and the Centre for Appropriate Technology. It is committed to working together to develop better, innovative links between education and training. CSIRO has had a continuing research presence in Alice Springs since 1953. NITI1 Limited is a not-for-profit private company established in 2003. NITI1 manages the intellectual property from the former Desert Knowledge Cooperative Research Centre, research activities and partnerships of the Cooperative Research Centre for Remote Economic Participation, and the Australian Feral Camel Management Project. Desert Knowledge Australia is a national organisation that identifies and develops key local and national projects that contribute to a social, economic and environmentally sustainable future for desert and remote Australia. On behalf of all the organisations involved in setting up this site and the organisations on the precinct, I welcome you. Charity, right? Oh, sorry, Charity. If you just, yeah. Okay, so thanks, and again, welcome on behalf of the families from Central Australia and Yarrandah people, and I hope it proves to be a stimulating discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harold, indeed, for that. Now we move to the commencement of the lecture proper, and I'd just like to frame it in 3 or 4 minutes maximum. As you know, the title tonight of the lecture is Red Dirt Curriculum, Reimagining Remote Education. The lecture series that we have established and are promoting, it has an aim, and the aim is to engage and inform individuals, communities and the wider public about the issues, opportunities and importance of rural remote areas for the future of Australia. The position we take in our work is that vibrant, productive, rural and remote communities are absolutely central to the sustainability and the future of this nation. They're not on the margins, they're at the centre, and we see ourselves as playing a role in that. And tonight I think we're particularly privileged in having 4 people gather together to present this lecture to us. As you know from the flyer that went out, the 4 people are Karina Lester, and I'm reading in the order of the flyer, Makinti Minajuku. Karina is an Aboriginal language worker with the mobile language team in the discipline of linguistics, the School of Humanities at the University of Adelaide. Makinti is currently the director of the Pitjantjatjara Yankatjara Education Committee, which is on the APY lands. Sam Osborne is a senior research fellow with the University of South Australia, Cooperative Research Centre for Remote Economic Participation, and is involved in the Remote Economic Systems Project, and Katrina Jittai, who was the former director of the PYEC and is now currently working in the role as a school improvement coordinator for the APY lands. What we have assembled here tonight, I think, is a four people who have profound and informing perspectives around this really critical issue. And what they've done, or what they're going to do, is in a sense speak to the question, what knowledge matters for young people in the APY lands in the remote northwest corner of South Australia, and what would a contextualised red dirt curriculum look like if we were to reimagine the core elements of remote education. At the conclusion of the presentation, hopefully there will be some time for some questions and answers, and tomorrow morning from 9 till 11 in this place, we will conduct a follow-up seminar where there will be more opportunity to drill down and question, and in particular, my colleague sitting at the back, Associate Professor John Gunther, who is taking the principal lead on the remote education project with the CRC. He and I will work together, and principally John, with the speakers and others, to interrogate this, and you are warmly invited. And before you leave tonight, it would be great to just get an indication of who might like to attend that, so we've got some idea for organisation. And of course, at the very conclusion of this, we invite you to join with us for supper. Now, having said that, the order of speaker is Sam is going to open, and it's kind of like bookends or slices of a decent sandwich. I was trying to think of another nicer metaphor, Sam. But Sam is going to open the lecture, and this will be followed by McKenty. Katrina Jittai will then speak, and then Karina Lester, and then Sam will put the other bookend to the lecture. Once I sit down, I don't stand up again until we've been through each of the lecturers, and there will be a sense of pacing, and you may just see a little bit of a look in an eye from me to Sam, to Sandra, to somebody saying, how are we going on the pacing here, folks? But there's been a huge amount of preparation, and I'd like to acknowledge that in advance. But I think personally and professionally and intellectually and relationally, we're in for a treat. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to present, through these good folk, the third Sidney Myer Rural Lecture. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Great to see you all. The Remote Education Systems Project within the Cooperative Research Centre for Remote Economic Participation is a 5-year project, and it's designed to investigate how remote education systems can best respond to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community expectations, aspirations and needs. It will identify strategies and models that will improve outcomes for students and their families. So the project team based in Alice Springs is working to engage with a wide range of remote education stakeholders, with a particular focus on the Northern Territory, Western Australia and South Australia. In recent months, we've commenced a series of workshops and papers based around the concept of red dirt thinking. When we think of innovation, we've come to know the concept of blue sky thinking, when we're able to let ourselves dream and imagine what might be possible without limitation or constraint, to let our ideas loose into the realms of possibility. But as we look to the pragmatic task of taking a first step, actioning the thinking, it's the red dirt beneath the feet that beckons an impression in remote communities right across Australia. The focus of tonight's lecture is to reimagine a curriculum that holds blue sky thinking in one hand, but firmly grasps a sense of the pragmatic in the other, but importantly proposes what the core elements of a red dirt or locally imagined and relevant curriculum might offer. Red dirt can be found across a range of landscapes and languages, from saltwater country to the deserts and all points in between. Tonight we'll be focusing on the tri-state remote region of Central Australia, but in particular the APY, Anangu Pitjantjatjara Yankunytjatjara lands of the northwest region of South Australia and the southern region of the Northern Territory. And I think if I can get this to behave itself, and I can, that's a fairly basic map there. There's a few missing. Sorry, Andrea. Didn't mean to miss out half of your communities there. But the thing about Anangu communities, this term Anangu is used to refer to a Pitjantjatjara or Yankunytjatjara person, but it connects to a much broader region of family relationships and interconnected languages across the tri-state remote region of South Australia, the Northern Territory and Western Australia. So you'd expect to see places like Yallarashwanoke Valley referring to themselves as Anangu, and right up even some of the Lurija-speaking, Pintupi-speaking communities and so on. So it's a very, very wide footprint of Anangu. In recent years, remote education has been brought more closely into the broader national focus on uniform measurement of student attainment in English language literacy and numeracy, national teacher standards and the introduction of the Australian curriculum. This focus on nationalised approaches to standards, testing and performance has directed the attention of remote educators and remote education systems away from localised approaches to curriculum and education more broadly. The education system in Australia is informed from a Western neoliberal philosophical position where, broadly, the purpose of education is to achieve the goal of economic participation, where finding a job, building a career and achieving personal financial independence is an important mark of educational success. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander academics such as Nakada, Rigney, Arbin, Ford and others highlight that the Western philosophies that underpin mainstream Australian society and the broader education system is at odds with the axiologies, epistemologies, ontologies and cosmologies of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, particularly in the red dirt contexts of very remote communities. Yes, I know that was a very big long sentence and a mouthful. Ways of knowing and being and doing and stuff like that. So a few giggles, it's good. This is a critical point to understand in seeing the very remote communities as part of a national collective, but with marked and distinct differences at their heart and foundation. This means that as non-Indigenous red dirt educators, we cannot assume that our students and their communities share our sense of the purpose of education and our common sense assumptions about what education should prepare us for. More recently, nationally compared measures of attendance and NAPLAN results, and NAPLAN is the benchmark testing on English literacy and numeracy. I'm just going to put this down, sorry. Make some room. Has highlighted, so the NAPLAN results that have come out have highlighted the relatively poor performance of very remote schools in comparison to other schools across Australia. Policies such as closing the gap and the rhetoric of addressing disadvantage have again directed attention towards improving outcomes for what is a very narrow perspective on what constitutes a good education. Although I want to spend time highlighting the strengths and capacities of Anangu communities, we need to recognise that very remote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island communities continue to face significant challenges in relation to high levels of unemployment, self-harm and substance abuse amongst young people, family violence, and concerns about the well-being of children and young people. These are very real and ongoing concerns for remote communities as well as education. Some early findings from the Remote Education Systems Project lay an interesting foundation for tonight's presentation. Since the introduction of nationalised testing and data comparison some 5 years ago, there has been little or no improvement in relation to attendance and NAPLAN scores for very remote schools. In fact, the gap between very remote Indigenous students and other Australian students has increased. In very remote schools with over 80% Indigenous enrolment, there's been no statistically significant change in NAPLAN scores except for Year 3 maths, which has in fact gone down. We know that NAPLAN is a crude instrument in terms of measuring student performance in very remote schools, But it is worth remembering that these are the measures that establish very remote schools as being behind or failing, and this influences the priorities that remote education systems adopt. School attendance is another important measure of educational success, and this graph shows the attendance figures from 2008 to 2013 for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. As you can see, on the bars on the left there show where the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander enrolment, and this is for remote schools, is below 80% attendance. Where the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island enrolment is below 80%. Attendance figures have remained pretty static, and you can see it's about 88% and hasn't really shifted over the 5-year view. But in schools where the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander enrolment is over 80%, there has been a slight variation across the 5-year period, which you can see. But 5 years on, the attendance rate, despite all of the focus, all of the campaigns, programs and slogans, attendance rates remain about the same as 5 years ago in 2008. Very little has changed. I'm not suggesting for a moment that school attendance is not important for a whole range of reasons, but as we'll see, we might need to rethink our assumptions about what improved attendance means for very remote schools. Oh, that was clever. Oh, I hope I haven't... We seem to have lost the last slide in the transfer. I apologise. I promise you there's a graph supporting what I'm about to tell you. Across Australia, data suggests that there is some level of relationship between attendance and performance. But in very remote schools where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander enrolment is above 80%, the data shows virtually no discernible relationship between attendance rates and NAPLAN scores. In other words, the logic that improved attendance will see an increase in NAPLAN results in very remote schools is not supported by the data. Other data shows that very remote non-Aboriginal students in the Northern Territory perform on par with their Darwin-based peers in NAPLAN results. And this suggests that factors such as remoteness and distance don't matter so much in terms of NAPLAN results, but the distance of things like language, culture, values, ways of knowing, being and doing from the Western philosophies that inform schooling are what determines the gap against these assessment measures. In effect, this positions schools located in red dirt communities as an island of culture where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students can feel somewhat alienated despite being so close to home. To improve remote education outcomes, current priorities include improving attendance, introducing teacher standards, teaching a national curriculum, increasing student numbers attending boarding schools, improving employment opportunities, pre-employment education and training options, and an early childhood focus, among others. In Western terms, education and the economy are closely related. There is a philosophy that a community is built around economy. Every so often, rhetoric about remote communities being allowed to exist or to continue to receive services being conditional on their economic viability reminds us of this fact. This logic may ring true for pastoralists, for example, or mining companies who would walk away from their cattle stations or mining operation if there was no longer any money to be made. But Anangal communities, for example, are firmly rooted in a significantly different philosophical, historical and relational position in regards to land and the reasons to be on country. This positions Anangal students in a significantly different way as to the reasons and motivations for engaging in school or getting a job. Nonetheless, the logic for educational success is repeated by teachers across remote schools. If you come to school every day, you can learn to read and write, finish school, maybe you can go away to boarding school or university, then you'll be able to come back and look after yourself and you can come back and help your family and your community. But through interviews and discussions held with remote Aboriginal community members, we continue to see that this thinking can be somewhat foreign, and the value of learning, knowledge, aspiration and imagining and identity remain firmly grounded in the red dirt context of the community. And this disparity in ways of being, knowing and doing leaves educators feeling frustrated by poor attendance and engagement, particularly into the secondary years that are so important for transitioning into employment and further learning. There have been a suite of initiatives and reforms affecting remote education, including partnership agreements, testing regimes, national standards, national curriculum and declarations. But when we look at the 5-year picture, it shows that very remote schools have not closed the gap despite concerted effort on the few key measures of attendance, English language literacy and numeracy benchmark scores. So what do Anangu say about what matters in an education and what Anangu students should be learning as part of a red dirt education? Tonight, Makinti will speak about the importance of acknowledging and retaining the power that Anangu hold and carry into the process of pursuing the power that Western education offers. Katrina will discuss the importance of building confidence in Anangu students and the importance of rethinking learning and closing the gap in the Anangu context. Karina will highlight the importance of language maintenance and development as a critical foundation for identity and future opportunities in education and employment. And finally, I will suggest some different ways we might reimagine a red dirt curriculum that allows students to find their element in their experience of education. Thank you.
Hello. Pala. Kun poira kanyindawo. Nganambara. Hold on to our culture strongly. Our culture, our language, and our stories has been told to us. We must hold on to tightly and not to let it go, because this gives us strength. When we travel to another place, we didn't leave it behind, because it is our culture. As we live on our own land, that gives us life with strong thinking, strong languages. But this has all changed, and it's changing every day. A new way has arrived. Education is important for our Anangu children to learn these new things better. We are really happy about this, and we want our Anangu children to gain understanding so that they can enter into this new world. It seems that we are continually behind, but now we want to go forward. The government has given us this opportunity for our children to get better knowledge, and we really want this. But we don't want to leave behind all our strengths and our power in order to receive this new knowledge. We must keep our languages, our stories, our land, and our family connections. These are things that gives us power in our land. If we only learn this new language, English, we will lose our culture, our land, and our stories. And later, if we go back, try to search for it, we will not find it. It will be lost forever. But if we hold on to our strengths and as we go, learn new strengths, we will hold onto both strengths and keep strong in both Anong way and Birnba way. I believe the education will open many doors for us to enter. We are looking forward to these big changes, but we must never forget what belongs to us. We must hold on to our strengths always. We don't want to feature our culture. We don't want to forget our culture. It is important for us to know that our culture has been there in the past and will be there in the future. There are lots of new changes coming to our children in Anong schools, and we are very happy about these things. But now the Australian curriculum is expected to be taught in Anong schools, and this is very difficult for them to learn properly. At this rate, perhaps we will continue to fail year after year. We need to find a new road to get to the learning that we need to be changing the curriculum to an Anong curriculum. When I was a child, I would go out together with my parents, learn by watching them. They taught me to hunt, gather bush fruits, build shelters and be safe in the bush so that I didn't get bitten by snakes, burned by fire or lost in the bush. They taught me how to recognize a healthy fat animal from a skinny one and to gather bush fruits when they were ripe, not unripe. I learned the names of my grandfather's and my grandmother's country. It's not written on paper, it's written in my heart. These are the things that I learn about and that I think about teaching to my children, grandchildren. It's my experience. When I went to school, it was a bilingual education at Annabella. I learned my language first, to read and write, but I was speaking Binder, but I have to learn to write and to read. And then English, to read and write and to speak. When I was 16 years of age, it was my family's decision that I would have to go away to school in Adelaide, Chips Cross Girls High School. It was my family, my parents, pushed me and helped me through. 2 years of high school weren't easy. It was hard. It was lonely with all the white students around me. But because my dad was strong, he kept saying to me, "You have to stay and learn." I've stayed and learned new things away from home, in a new place, an environment. And the most important things that my parents want me to learn was to learn to read, speak, and write English as my second language. I'm still learning today and every day. And this is my education experience of learning. Like my father did for me, it's important that my family should encourage and push their children to learn new things, not to give up. Our parents and their generation had incredible knowledge about all sorts of things, even though they didn't understand how school worked, but they still supported us to learn in school. We have excellent schools in our communities, and it can be hard to understand why children aren't going to school all of the time. School make a big effort to make sure children get to school. We need to think about how we, as an older generation, can be strong and encourage our children in their learning too. We know that this is difficult, but it is the right time for Anu to speak up for their children and to help them get stronger in their education.
I'm a little bit, that's so, no problem with my throat. I'm a little bit nervous, but when I see my friends and friends are here, you make me strong, Tonight there are 4 main things I want to talk about. Building the learning on a strong foundation, learning in the spirit, building confidence, and closing the gap. There are my main things I want to talk about. If a tree is not growing properly, we have to seek really hard to find the problem. When we look at the tree, we see only the top part. But we need to look deeper at the roots. We must look deep inside to see what is not working. In our education, sometimes we spend all of our time looking at the leaves and branches, Sometimes we got all the time looking at all the branches, only them. But we need to look well below the ground to understand what is really happening for our children. When a tree grows from the seed, sometimes it need help, If a tree isn't strong enough to stand on its own, it can't grow. It needs to be tied to the strong stick, when the tree is bending over, we need to put another strong stick and tie them. And with that strong tree, that tree will grow. That it can use the strength of a stick to stand on the ground so that at the end it can stand as a strong tree on its own. We need to see the education process as beginning from the seed and think about how we can support the growth of our children to stand on their own. Learning in the spirit. In the past, we learned from all our family as we listened to their stories over and over and camped together and went hunting. Every day we learn about hunting kangaroos, gathering the bush timber and cooking the kangaroo. We learn the process have had to do this task correctly. This is the way they learned in the past, but today they learn through books, through reading the books. So it would be seemed that learning today is more difficult. In the past, they learned by watching, listening, and practicing what their family taught them. Their families were very knowledgeable about the Anang way. This is ongoing learning. In this way, our children grab hold of the learning with their spirit and hold it forever. But today, the parents are at the descent and not involved in what is being taught to the children. In the past, we have people lived in the villages. They were all close together. Now things have changed. People lived in a house. They are no longer living close to everyone else. A long time ago, we have little villages, and people were sitting close to the family, next to families. But nowadays, we have a lot of houses, and families are a long way, and the kids are missing all the families. Children learn well when people continually talk to them. The words are spoken are received by the children's spirit. When they are spoken gently with the passion, it is a spirit that keeps the children confident. The learning enter into the spirit and remain in him. It is not the paper, but in the spirit. It is in the way that I've learned to search and dig for honey ants. All of this knowledge is in my spirit. It is there for always. I don't need to look up in the instruction in the book. It is deep in my spirit, And this way we must carefully watch over children's spirit. We shouldn't keep telling them that they are dumb. Don't hurt them. It is the same spirit that is working in a child to make them strong and building confidence. We must build confidence in the children's spirit so that they will try new things. Children grow more confident when they start slowly with the easy things and practice by touching and writing. But we keep teaching them pian bawai, that white fella way. They just can't get it, In the pian bawai, everything works around the timetable. So it might be math, 30 minutes, literacy, 30 minutes, reading, 30 minutes. The children don't get enough time to try really hard to understand the teacher. And then he just starts his work, and the teacher say, okay, it's time to pack up, And so his spirit just keep up trying. So in a way, we are closing the door to his learning. We must keep them plenty of time for our children to learn and have a confidence to try. It is only when they are confident they will be able to open all the closed door. They will only come into the school and learn when they have confidence. Without confidence, they will be always afraid. If we want to build the child's confidence, we must talk gently to him and keep helping. We must strengthen the spirit with kind words and not keep telling him he has made a mistake, especially in front of others. Don't keep telling them to show their work to others, but wait until they are alone with him to talk about the work and encourage him to try different ways to learn. If he can't learn, don't frighten them, but try to find other ways to teach. This will strengthen the child's spirit. He will become brave enough to come to school and learn. We can change the way the children think and understand by changing the way we teach. We mustn't keep doing the same things. If we teach a lesson and the child doesn't learn, we need to try to teach the lesson different way. Teaching in our language and teaching our culture and teaching the children to read and write Pijanjara will also open up their spirit down deep in their roots, because this will give them the courage to try new things for themselves. It will help their confidence also when they have someone close by and continually supporting them. We should be inviting Anangu from the community to come and teach the Anangu culture. The AW, that Anangu education workers and Anangu teachers should be teaching them to read and write in the local language. If you are worried about your child, don't say anything in front of him, because he will know and he'll recognize your body language. Your face, your eyes, and your lips. If you shake your head, but keep your face happy and try something different, even when he makes mistake, say positive things to them. And the next one is rethinking closing the gap. There are many gaps in our children's spirit, and they can't close them on their own. School can do much to help all the children, both young and older. Children can't find their future on their own. They just can't do it. It is as if their spirit are wandering around a very high cliff. When the children is afraid, he can't learn. There is a way we can close the gap. The child is in the middle and the family is surrounded. When the family is surrounded the child, they can help him. Only his family can help him to change the positive way of thinking. When the family watches over him, the child feels secure. The mother and father can help child to be brave and to learn new things. Our children need to learn together with us as a one spirit. Our spirit is like a solid rock for them to stand on it. It is only when they are standing together with us that they can stand firm without falling. The mother and the father are the solid rock for the child, and it is from them they can find the strength to try new things. It has also been this way that our families are our rock, and we have held our stories in our spirit and grow up strong and confident with our stories intact. But our ways is different. We don't have only one father and mother. Like I don't have my sisters' children. They call me mother, and my brother they call auntie. Cause we are there are a lot of families. Not only Pian boy, there's only father and mother and children. That's it. Cause for Anang way, there's a lot of families around, aunties, mother. We got a lot of families to look after children. Our children have a lot of families. They have sisters, brothers, uncles and aunties and grandparents and other close family. This is the way we protect our children. Our children will grow in their learning at school when their families stand with them as a strong, solid rock. They will be strong and confident through our spirit. We are using our spirit as a foundation for the children. If the child parents are weak, then an extended family will come alongside of him and support them. I know of important stories for children to learn. The dreaming, chukurpa, the land, family, connection, culture and other learning. This is our foundation. If we are going to teach this new curriculum, we must build it on the top of a foundation that is already there. When we bring these two together, we will make it easier for our children to learn. Our children must learn Hawaii first, and then later they will learn in a different language. So if we want to close the gap, we must change the way we teach the curriculum, and this will help the children to learn. Our children will be able to learn new things. We must come together, the AW, teachers, principal and families, and close the gap that are stopping the children from learning. We just needed to look at the way we are teaching and discover the way that the children learn and don't learn. The school should have family tree for all the children in the school. We also need to provide the room at the school their family can come and feel comfortable to come and discuss their children's. There is often no room available for family. They can feel that the school are only for white people and the staff. When the parents and family come to school, they feel impressed and afraid. Our school must be open for everyone. The last one, read that curriculum. We've already got a read that curriculum, and it's always been there. The strength and foundation of our language and the culture is still there. And we need to build that curriculum from the foundation. Bye.
Well, that's a hard act for me to follow after having my big sisters do their presentations. I've just got to pull up a PowerPoint. So Sam, if this is your laptop, Ross, you're going to have to... It's not. Oh, here's the other one. And slideshow. So my little presentation is Mandongoro Nindiringanyi. This is about a red dirt curriculum. Before I continue on, I do want to acknowledge and thank Jilby Harold further for that beautiful welcome to country. And I grew up here in Alice Springs, so I feel really back at home, and I thank again Uncle Harold for that beautiful welcome to country. I do want to acknowledge other Aboriginal people that are here in the room as well, so thank you for coming for this evening as well. Some Wages in the room, so that's lovely. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to John as well for making this event possible, and of course for Sam as well for his great involvement in pulling this thing together, encouraging us three women to get up here and talk a little bit about just our experience and just what we've been able to do, just the little bit out there, whether we're working on the lands or working up or down in South Australia or wherever. This evening I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to be talking about teaching what is relevant for Aboriginal people and for young Arnongal kids as well, but also talking about this idea that's floating around in my head about a Bidjinjara Yankunytjatjara language immersion school on the Arnongal Bidjinjara Yankunytjatjara lands. This is a photo of Biramimi, which is a place where I grew up at Mimili. So I'm going to talk a little bit in Ngayuguwanga, in Ngayugu Yankunytjatjara. Ngayugu ini kainanya, ka Ngayu Lukwari, Muguringi Jugujugu Wanganjago. Muno Adaga Wanganjago, Red Dirt curriculum, Banya Mandangoro Nindiringani. Ngayu Bulgaringo, Biramimila, Nguro Wirunga. Ngayu Ngonju, Mamangoro, Monogami, Jamunga, Wira Nindel Garini, Ngayu Arnongal Gohara. These are two very instrumental women in my life who played quite a grounding role. But just on the translation, I've introduced myself. My name is Karina Lester, and I'd like to say a little and speak clearly about this idea of a red dirt curriculum. I grew up at Mimili Community, so some of you might know Mimili Community, in a very beautiful place, with my mother and father, and of course my grandparents, beautifully teaching me my Arnongal culture, and we were living out there at Mimili as well. So Nana Bingay Ubija is on the left, Yami Lester's mother, and Nana Gumbalwater Brown, who is the younger sister to Nana Bingay. So I grew up with this grounding. So this topic is very close to me, as I have so many thoughts on this, but I only have a short period of time. I've got to keep it in 15 minutes or something, so I'll see how I go. But I do want to raise a few important points to think about. This very issue of education raises many, many issues of survival and just getting through one day at a time. When Sam Osborne approached me about this opportunity to meet at one of his Thinking Outside the Tank sessions, I was only going to come and listen. But as we got talking about this, I realised I had something to say about it, and that it was very important to speak from an Arnongal perspective. There were some of us who were here this evening as well who were there at that particular session, and myself, my older sister, and I think that was it. That was Arnongal that were in the room. So I thought it was important for us to share a little bit of our idea and what we thought of a red dirt idea. It was red dirt thinking, and then I came up with this red dirt curriculum. So I ended up saying a few things. So tonight, as I said, I'd like to share with you just some of my experiences as I was growing up on the APY lands. I also, as I mentioned, I grew up in Alice Springs as well, and then later in Adelaide. As I mentioned, I grew up at Mimili in the very beautiful Everard Ranges, and you saw a photo of that, on the Arnongal Bidjinjara Yankunytjatjara lands. It was there that I, along with my older brother and my older sister, spent time with our amazing parents Yami and Lucy Lester, and elders, Jamuganji, a Yankunytjatjara man, and also Gummy Bingay, who's the lady on the left. She was a Bidjinjara woman, and the extended Arnongal family. Hearing them speak their Yankunytjatjara Wanga and also their Bidjinjara Wanga as well, seeing how they communicated with others, how culture was so important to my Arnongal family, and that knowledge of what we call our wabar. And wabar, Yankunytjatjara speakers say wabar. Some of you might be familiar with the term jugurba, but Yankunytjatjara speakers use the term wabar. And this knowledge of your country and understanding your roles and responsibilities. I was very privileged to grow up and experience life on a cattle station, because at that time Dad was running Mimili as a cattle company, and so we grew up there, and that's where I spent a lot of my time. I look back over those years and realise that those years were the years my parents and Ngayugami and Jamuganji as well, my grandfather, grounded me and taught me about my wabar, country, family, and the skills of survival. It was those years that I learnt my language and about how important it is, how communication is significant to knowing who you are. So I've used this term Nindi Bulgayuda, and these are the knowledgeable ones. You know, these old people that you see sitting around, some of the biological survey work that the old people had done, this amazing knowledge that we as young people grow up, you know, we've got to try and learn from these amazing elderly people as well. So we later moved into Alice Springs, and as my older brother said to me once, we were moving in to get educated. So that was a turning point for me. The new way, it was new language, it was new life, it was new culture, country, different country for me to adapt to and learn, and my brother was right, because we did get educated, and we look back. I have some very fond memories of this beautiful place in Bundwa. So growing up here in Alice Springs was very grounding, but it was all very new to me. Both my parents were very influential in our lives, not only in our animal culture, but also in the three of us, of understanding the importance of getting a Western education. This was important to them, that we gain the skills to also survive in this new world that existed. But it was also understood how to move between the two worlds, because we were coming from this upbringing of Jamal Gugamiguara and then coming into this new world around, you know, Alice Springs and growing up in Alice. Today I look back over those years and I'm very grateful that I was supported during this time and given this wonderful opportunity to broaden my view of the world that I was living in between two very different cultures. This amazing knowledge that these old people were sharing with the scientists. They were scientists that came out, sat down with these old people, gathered their knowledge, and it was a lot of knowledge about, you know, ecology, plants and animals, all of that. So these old people, of course, had grown up living that nomadic life. But today I'm in Adelaide and I'm working at the University of Adelaide as an Aboriginal language worker and a co-manager for a small team known as the Mobile Language Team in South Australia. We support South Australian Aboriginal languages. We try to support Aboriginal people on what they want to do with their language programs. Working in this area has allowed for me to continue to work with my Yankunytjatjara language and be a voice, as my parents were, you know, great advocates and always advocated the importance of language to Aboriginal people. I work alongside great professors and linguists and Aboriginal language workers, all working for the purpose of language revitalisation and maintenance of South Australian Aboriginal languages. Working at the University of Adelaide has made me think intensely about my animal culture and about my Yankunytjatjara language and the direction it is going in, but also about the quality of education children on the Yarnung Bijinjara Yankunytjatjara lands are getting but struggling with every day. Very recently I was on the lands and had the opportunity to deliver a Bijinjara Yankunytjatjara language training course to Yarnung education workers, AEWs, and many of the participants struggled to understand the grammar of their language. But we're in the classroom teaching that language. It got me thinking about the children in the classroom and about how they were understanding things, or maybe not understanding things, about both languages. So that was a whole learning curve of, you know, it sort of opened and made me think about things, about what is it that we need to do. Ngurija, Jamuganji is on the left. Again, Mimili is my place where I grew up with as well. So Bijinjara Yankunytjatjara and the English language, what are they learning in the classrooms? So as I said, I'm talking about relevant things that are relevant to Arnawajura, but also about this immersion school, this idea of this language immersion school. Today, many Ngunnawal kids growing on the Ngunnawal Bidjinjara Yankunytjatjara lands are challenged with many issues such as remoteness, low socio-economic status, poor health and well-being, environmental, and this could be within the family unit environmental, but physical environment, being in a different location, not their birthplace, but living in a community. And again, foreign, being in a community, going to a community store, going to a community school. It's all foreign and all very, very new to a lot of people who, for my generation, 2 generations ago, Jamal Mob were nomadic people. Jamal Ganji hunted and gathered. So it's only 2 generations down the track that we are now in this kind of foreign environment, moving around, trying to go to school, trying to get this education. But there's also various forms of abuse and, the list goes on. There's lots and lots of things going on in communities on a day-to-day basis. The one place that they should be able to get some sort of peace of mind is also very challenging for children as they are forced to think and learn in a very foreign language, English. For many kids, English is a second language, or even a third or a fourth language for that matter. And so the level of learning in the English language is limited, and the kids struggle to use and understand this language on a day-to-day basis. Subjects are taught in English, in that language, and most of the time it seems irrelevant to the Ngunnawal child. So I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to have a glass of water first. Thanks, Sam. So I'm going to talk a little bit about teaching what is relevant. What is it, what do we need to teach our little children growing up in those remote communities? So educating a child and teaching his or her place in the world they live is to the child's understanding for his or her place in their society. These are challenged every day. And why? Are the children on the APY lands learning about what is relevant and important to them in a school context? So, maths and English. They are important things and they are very important topics. But is it relevant to an Ngunnawal child? So I've come up with a little bit of a list that I thought what might be relevant to somebody who's a little Ngunnawal kid going in, just starting school. So such things as identity and belonging. So, sorry, I'm flicking through. So that was photos of Dad and his brother. And there is Mum, of course, who's been such a great grounding person as well. But to teach what is relevant, I think we need to start looking at teaching the identity and belonging. Which family they belong to and how to relate to what we call Waljabidi, to the family, and that extended family. Perhaps the land rights movement, which is so critical to understanding how they got to be living in the red dirt in the first place. Ernabella Mission and the role it played in those early days in the 30s and 40s and 50s, but also learning a little bit of the history of the surrounding communities, such as perhaps Mimili community. So I mentioned we grew up at Mimili and it was a cattle company. So looking at that history at Mimili and the kids to learn about Mimili history, that it was a cattle company at that time and we were running a business and a viable business, cattle business, and its history, but also what we call Jugurba or Wabar. So Bidjinjara Jurda used the term Jugurba and Yankunytjatjara used the term Wabar. This knowledge is shared knowledge and can be passed on to them by their own people as well as their teachers and explained to them by their own people so they grow and build their understanding of kinship and the importance of kin, law and culture. This grounding in the red dirt grounds children in their knowledge of language, and these are really important, language, law and culture. Having this knowledge, children know where they belong and how they relate to their communities, whether it be in their remote community or the wider Western Desert community and beyond. Children need to be taught about their country, know their language and its place in their world, and then to learn about their place in the wider world. Support them and encourage their learning to be relevant to the life they live in their communities. Learning about their communities makes it easier for children to understand their place in their communities. Understanding family and the important role that family plays, understanding their role within that family. Community, also surrounding communities. If you live at Mimily, you know about Freegon, you know about Ernabella, you know about Galga or Bibalajara or even beyond. Learning about the Arnonga Bijinjara Yankunyara lands and that land rights movement, that was very instrumental. And there was a lot of people, our old people, who had done quite a lot of work fighting for those land rights. Children need to know that. Children need to know the struggle that the old people had done. The far north region of South Australia, but then also other states and territories as well. We have a close association with Murridjulu community, which sits in the Northern Territory. But you've got other communities in Western Australia, Irunju, lots of other places in Ngajajara country, so into Western Australia and other places. But also giving them understanding about Australia and where Australia is, but then also branching out to the wider world as well. So I've come up with this idea. This is not an answer, this is just me, floating around in my head and thinking it would be amazing to have a Bijinjara Yankunyara language immersion school. So I have spoken a little bit about learning in remote communities and what's relevant for young Arnonga children, but not what about what I'd like to see on the Arnonga Bijinjara Yankunyara lands for my family, for Jijirura on the lands. The idea of a Bijinjara Yankunyara language immersion school that currently doesn't exist on the lands has been at the front of my thinking for quite some time. The Bijinjara Yankunyara language immersion school would be a school driven by the community, run by Arnonga, with an Arnonga principal. So, I think that might have been the slide before. But also, this Arnonga principal leading the way for the Arnonga children of the APY lands. Central to this is for Arnonga to be playing an active role in their child's education, getting involved and participating, whether it be teaching because of their own personal knowledge and skill that they have or experience, or volunteering in the school environment. Canteens, we all need volunteers for the canteen, don't we? The school would be based somewhere central, perhaps Umwa, anywhere on the lands. And in my view, I think it should be co-ed. None of this rotation of girls on first, 1 week, boys on second week. And I'll say why. Arnonga children need to learn about how to relate to one another, how to make decisions together and build their skills in communication. And quite simply, to build a respect for one another. The curriculum would be built together by Arnonga and Arnonga teachers with the support of non-Arnonga or Aboriginal people, encouraging and drawing out great ideas with a focus on only the best outcome for that child. Central to this process is Arnongo leading the way and being inclusive, having the control of the decision making and driving it Arnongo way. The purpose of this approach would be to mould and shape young Arnongo into competent, bilingual, motivated, driven and focused young adults with a strong sense of purpose in life, to confidently function and operate in two worlds, using this strength to establish a solid grounding for the future generations. Strong in Gamigo, grandmothers, but also Jamugo, Ara, grandfathers Ara. This curriculum includes the skills and knowledge related to specific sites they are culturally connected to, regional understanding of context of the state they live in, the neighbouring Aboriginal groups, other states and territories, and Australia as a whole, and then that rest of the world. So I often talk about wanting our children to be confident in both worlds. But what we struggle with is guiding our children in this complex world when we are also struggling with it too. Let us take a step back to refocus ourselves and think carefully about the path we want for our children to travel on, the future we want and the growth we want to see, not only in ourselves but also across that region and the whole of the community, rippling out to the wider world. To have a Bijanjara Yangunjara language immersion school in the Arnongo Bijanjara Yangunjara lands, teaching the grammar of our language, of our Arnongo language, and the very skill to teach this to our own would be incredible. High levels of skill in our language underpins critical knowledge for teaching subjects such as land management, biology, ecology, and I showed you those slides of those old people sharing that knowledge, anthropology, art and performance, kinship, and astrology, just to name a few. This school would seek to work to establish career pathways and open new network opportunities, not only in the APY lands, but also linking with schools both nationally and internationally. We need to aspire to providing a balanced and achievable education that is both grounded and aspiring. An education that privileges Arnongo language, knowledge, community members, and our collective identity in the education process. So that's just my little insight into a red dirt curriculum. Thank you very much.
Hey, you're doing great, you guys. Do we need to give them a wriggle or something, John? You like doing silly things and we copy you?
Away, Sam.
Oh, right, thanks. We can start a new kids band called the Wriggles. All right.
Bring us home now.
I'm landing this thing. Ken Robinson's 2009 book, The Element, How Finding Your Passion Changes Everything, describes the element as the point where natural talent and personal passion meet. And here he highlights story after story of young people who are failing at school, disengaged, turned off, and for so many of them their sense of self-worth ground to dust. And yet these names are household names as geniuses in their field. Paul McCartney, guitarist and vocalist with the Beatles, Matt Groening, creator of The Simpsons, and Albert Einstein are notable examples where traditional school-based teaching methods of music, art and maths, for example, did not inspire or light the imagination, but instead built frustration and a sense of failure. This did not mean, of course, that these people did not possess a genius of intelligence, creativity, imagination and passion, or that they were unable to learn. Reading this book left me thinking about Anangu youth who are frequently disengaged from school, and according to nationally compared data, they're failing or behind. And I began to reflect on the natural talent and passion that does exist and how Anangu schools might make room for students to find their element in their experience of education. And I found myself asking the question, well, what do Anangu do when no one, like teachers and service providers, is looking because they love it and they feel successful? And on reflection, I realised that Anangu engage in a hugely diverse range of activities, although they might not necessarily fit into the formal learning or earning frame. Many of these activities can happen without teachers being aware of them going on or really fully understanding what they're about. For example, Anangu continue their ceremonial traditions at certain times of the year, connecting with communities across thousands of kilometres. There are currently focus groups across the APY lands working on translating parts of the Old Testament into Pitjantjatjara language during school holidays and as ongoing workshops and activity. Anangu regularly run church services in their communities, in homes and at homelands, relatively independent of external supports to do so. And these services don't look much like a metropolitan church service, but young people write and perform their own songs, and services are conducted in 2 or more languages. Art centres remain a creative, dynamic and vibrant centre of intergenerational knowledge transfer, social and cultural engagement. Oh, and they also make incredibly inspiring works of art, in case you hadn't noticed. And football and softball teams load up and travel to the far reaches of other desert communities to participate in sporting carnivals, and sporting events are also forums where local bands are showcased. People hunt, produce bush medicines, spend weekends with the family, digging out honey ants and witchetty grubs, allowing adults and children alike to clear their thinking and be in a completely different and positive space. And this is critical to the well-being of families who continue to face significant stresses and challenges within family and community life. Anangu regularly attend meetings that deal with complex issues of policy, service provision, community safety, health and education. There are a whole host of Aboriginal corporations under ORIC, which is the Office of Registered Indigenous Corporations, or ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, comprising a membership base where Anangu sit as directors, members and stakeholders. Anangu attend AGMs, engage with lawyers and legal processes, finance reports and financial processes, deal with anthropologists and complex cultural overlays within the business of the corporation. They engage broader national social policy debates and advocate for the membership and the community more broadly. Anangu engage in high-level politics and with senior political leaders. A complex and dynamic Aboriginal political landscape is alive and well, following a strong tradition spanning thousands of years. And all of this whilst teachers are busy teaching. An often touted phrase is that there's no economy in remote communities. Economic participation remains a strong focus for closing the gap initiatives, and creating and supporting pathways to employment remains a goal for education. The logic is you go to school, and when you finish school, you get a job. And yet, economic participation in the Anangu context needs to be seen in broader terms than the relatively narrow frame of simply getting a job. The 1981 APY Land Rights Act, Karina's mentioned, the 1980 Kadadi Land Claim, the 1985 Handback of Uluru Kadajura, among others, mean that Anangu sit as landholders under these various agreements, providing significant economic and social opportunities as alternatives to more traditional learning or earning pathways. Anangu own the land, and we need to remember that. And this turns the economic participation paradigm and the power relationships that exist in relation to economies on its head. And McKinty has reminded us this evening that for Anangu, education and economic challenges are as much about power as they are about learning or earning. This is not a startlingly new revelation, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders, like Noel Pearson, for example, have long argued for the economic potential of land ownership to be realised. But education systems, schools and school leaders can live an existence that's quite separate from the world of Aboriginal corporations, corporate governance and the potential economic and social benefit that these structures offer. As a result, schools are generally not positioned well to prepare students for informed engagement at the boardroom level. This increases reliance on the professional competence and personal ethics of the generally non-Aboriginal management of local organisations, and it shifts the locus of power away from the local community. And this is where a red dirt curriculum can come in. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't encourage students to succeed in boarding schools or seek trade training opportunities or get a job. In fact, it is very important that our current efforts are vastly improved in this regard. But if we are to make room for Ngunnawal students to find their element in education and economic participation, we need to see the essential elements of relationship to the land, intergenerational social relationships, language, ecological knowledge and Ngunnawal histories as important in a dynamic curriculum, as the women have eloquently described, I think you'll agree, this evening. The concept of a red dirt curriculum can be a current challenge in the current political climate, where so much public scrutiny currently exists around the narrow measures of attendance rates and NAPLAN scores. Widening our view of what a good education is in the red dirt context of Ngunnawal education takes courage, and it needs to be imagined from the inside out. I'm also not advocating that we ignore or dismiss the Australian curriculum, or that classroom by classroom teachers should busily begin rewriting the curriculum as they see fit. There is scope within the Australian curriculum to pursue localised values, knowledge and language and link it back to the broader aims and outcomes of the Australian curriculum. I am suggesting that innovative approaches such as building regionally based partnerships for the development of language, knowledge and curriculum could be worth pursuing. So rather than simply demanding that schools deliver a red dirt curriculum, engaging local organisations, schools, universities, training and employment service providers and Ngunnawal elders as partners and teachers would build capacity into the system to assist local schools to ensure that a red dirt curriculum is a first-class curriculum. Such an approach builds opportunities for training and employment for Ngunnawal, but importantly, it privileges Ngunnawal, their knowledge and experience as valued and valuable in our schools as part of a red dirt education. So this begs the question of what an Ngunnawal education should be for. As a corporation interpreter, I regularly work with Ngunnawal who sit at meetings as traditional owner representatives, corporation directors, corporation members, advisory board representatives, as well as community members. These roles demand complex, high-order thinking skills that are applied across the complex cultural landscape. In these capacities, Ngunnawal make important decisions about so many aspects of community life, and it stands to reason that schools should make space to prepare young people for this type of work. Even though it may not constitute formal employment, it certainly engages Ngunnawal at the threshold of economic participation with opportunities to influence economic and social participation into the future. I wonder how many of you here this evening have come from city homes, and perhaps how many of you might have been involved in stakeholder meetings in the last 6 months to discuss the service delivery agreements about providing your home with power or treating the water that comes out of your tap, or law and order issues, attendance rates at your local school, the legal tenure of the land that your house sits on, or even pose as a community the vexed question of what on earth is happening with young people in our community today. A red dirt curriculum should not attempt to mirror a mainstream curriculum, but needs to unashamedly amplify Ngunnawal knowledge and the things that are important to Ngunnawal, building confidence to then take on the other aspects of Western knowledge, skills and social norms. Scaffolding from one knowledge system to the other and back again may well be important pedagogical innovations in this type of approach. Such an approach can still be linked or embedded within the broad Australian curriculum, but it needs to be well supported and intentionally resourced to bring these teams together to assist schools and teachers to engage students in this type of learning approach. These things don't happen by accident. In terms of the potential negative impacts that prioritising local values might have on remote schools, it could be fair to say that if attendance and NAPLAN results are the measure of our success, we couldn't really do any worse than we currently are, so why not give it a go? Thank you. Historically, Harris's 1990 concept of two-way schooling and Yunupingu's both ways concept advocated an approach that worked from local language and knowledge and scaffolded students across into engagement with Western knowledge. But the systemic and policy priorities in remote education over the last decade have shifted to the point that many current remote educators would not understand the fullness of what was proposed some 20 to 30 years ago. This has occurred to the point that terms such as bilingual or both ways or two ways are woven into curriculum and pedagogical approaches that are perhaps better described as one way in both their intent and practice. It could be worthwhile revisiting the historical knowledge and curriculum debates in informing future planning and innovation. Katrina's argued this evening for the need to work from a position of affirming students and building their confidence as a foundation for embracing new knowledge and social contexts. This is an important insight. The recent opening of the Trade Training Centre at Umua and the semi-residential boarding innovations at Nyangadadara College in Yalara provides opportunities to bring Anangu students together to engage in relevant topics and meet with expert teaching teams. I know some schools might be thinking, where will we find people who can teach all this red dirt stuff? And in the first instance, evolving technologies has something to offer alternative delivery models, but short-term intensive delivery of curriculum also provides further opportunities to make this possible. We need to remember that land councils such as APY and the Central Land Council based here in Alice Springs employ corporation managers, anthropologists, interpreters and linguists, environmental scientists, legal advisors, accountants and community development managers, and I'll take a breath, and some of you are here tonight. This is part of the suite of professionals that seem to sit in isolation to our schools. In addition, art centres stand as an incredible educational and knowledge asset. Organisations such as interpreter services, media organisations and Bible translators have the skills and knowledge to bring together teams to deliver a range of language-based curriculum where capacity is otherwise lacking at the local school level. The resources are there to build mutual educational and economic benefit, but we need to see knowledge and expertise in far broader terms than the school-based teaching staff alone. In short, we need to reimagine education delivery and who it is that constitutes our teaching staff. This can present challenges for education systems, and perhaps independent school structures are best positioned to adopt some innovative and alternative approaches to curriculum delivery, although structural reforms such as we are seeing at the moment in the APY lens may offer opportunities to reposition the system to be able to deliver education and curriculum under a more flexible approach in regards to industrial arrangements, curriculum delivery, and the kinds of subjects and knowledge that constitute an Anangu education. Fundamental to all of this is the need to bring the intergenerational assets that exist in the community inside the metaphorical school walls and the concept of what school business really is. That is, Anangu need to be front and centre in an Anangu education. When we synergise the knowers and the knowledge of both Indigenous and Western knowledge, education can offer students a much broader experience. Consider what a Year 8 or 9 subject in Anangu history might offer. Firstly, I think many young people in Anangu communities would be largely unaware of their grandparents' struggle for land rights. And this is important for them to know, as Karina's reinforced, and they need to hear it from their elders as well as from a Western knowledge perspective. And secondly, land rights as a historical focus opens a wonderful entree into red dirt legal studies, where the legal implications of existing land rights agreements should be taught and explored. Thirdly, red dirt economics could explore the economic implications of Anangu histories and landholder agreements. The business of corporate governance should be offered and linked in practical pathways and opportunities to understand Aboriginal corporations, much like work experience. Involving the wider community as part of an expert teaching team allows subjects such as the arts, language and translation, cultural studies, environmental science and connecting education with Anangu ecological knowledge to become possible. Learning about the land, the environment and the ecology is a critical part of the education and economy relationship for Anangu into the future, and an Anangu education needs to make room for ecological knowledge in the teaching and learning process. Engaging a wide circle of knowledge and expertise into our teaching teams is common practice in schools to deliver specialised programs, and we see it in things like football programs or mental health and wellbeing curriculum and so on. By privileging Anangu as specialist experts in Anangu education, these types of partnership approaches can help deliver specialised curriculum, such as the language focus that Karina's proposed this evening. So what if a red dirt curriculum could also open up new economic and knowledge exchange opportunities for communities and engage students more effectively with Western education and Western social contexts? Most Anangu communities have exchange relationships with urban schools. What if mainstream students in these exchange schools could enrol in red dirt subjects such as environmental science, Anangu histories or red dirt legal studies, with a focus on land rights, land tenure and Aboriginal corporations, for example? Working from the inside out, these students could attend a semi-residential workshop in Anangu communities and could host a return visit at their school, building stronger reciprocal relationships with Anangu schools and students. If, as is currently the case, the success of Aboriginal corporations and community organisations depends so heavily on finding competent, committed and ethical managers, it would seem sensible to be investigating in educating future teachers, nurses and managers from a red dirt paradigm. And if, as Nakata and colleagues 2012 suggest, there are critical tools for non-Indigenous educators to successfully position themselves at the cultural interface, then perhaps we should be proactively equipping and growing the kind of help that we'd like to see in the future. Education structures in Anangu schools across the tri-state remote region are currently undergoing significant changes. This offers opportunities for positive change. But in spite of the ebb and flow of systemic and policy restructure, we hope you've been able to acquire a strong sense of the important principles that need to guide educators, leaders and education systems in preparing young people in Anangu schools for a future that finds them in their element, confident in their own knowledge and engaging with Western knowledge and capable in their leadership of generations to come in the red dirt context of Anangu communities. Thank you very much.
Have a quick wriggle. Well, I think it's fair to say we've been treated with a treat this evening. And before perhaps I wrap up, if I just check my time, I only wriggled twice, Karina. We're going so well. Sam, you managed it to within a minute. So you're on a fast track to be Director General of Education, I can tell you. But But since you're on the PhD track, probably a Vice-Chancellor or at least a Deputy Vice-Chancellor in charge of administration. So, Sam, I said that. You better make it come true, and then when you do, I'll have 10%. So what I'd like to do on your behalf, and if I did it formally, as the Professor of Rural Education and Communities at Flinders University under the auspices of the Sidney Myer Foundation and Myer Fund, who have provided the resources for this, to express profound thanks to our 4 speakers tonight and those people who have supported them through this journey. It's not been easy. There's been a lot of work, let me tell you, and many of them are in this room, but you've seen the good fruits today and this evening. I think we've heard something about new knowledges. In fact, old knowledge is made new, right? Brought into the foreground. Knowledge that needs to be privileged far more than sublimated. And I said this afternoon in somewhat of a throwaway line, but I didn't actually say it in a throwaway line way. I said this, once at Flinders University, there was a wonderful educator called Ted Lovegrove, who was the first winner of the Education Medal at Flinders University. And I first got involved with Aboriginal education in a big way when I became principal of Ceduna Area School. In my nearly 50 years of professional education, believe it or not, probably the most challenging assignment I have ever had. And we were wrestling with a lot of issues, and Ted said, John, it's like this, if we get it right for Aboriginal kids, we'll get it right for everybody. And I think there's something profound still lurking within inside that. And what we've heard tonight is an exposition of that in a profound way for Anangal and for everybody. I think we've had tonight knowledge in abundance. I think we've had wisdom, insights, challenges, and not only all of that, but I think what we've had from our 4 speakers, Sam, Makati, Katrina and Karina, is more than just a few guide pegs along the road. There's some profound stuff here, and I'm using stuff in a deeply academic way, as you'd understand. Epistemologically, axiology, cosmologically, and so it goes on as we academics swallow the dictionary once again. But we've got some profound stuff to work with, and we've got some living treasures, and I don't say that in any diminishing, trite way. Because one of the objectives of running this lecture as we've done is to try and provide a platform for some new, wise voices to come forward. The easiest thing would have been to find someone of so-called high profile and say, could you do us the grace by coming and saying something to us? And we've, in a sense, pushed back against that and tried to create, if you like, a new direction, relocate the site of privilege and the knowledge which privilege and the experience which privilege and informs what we might do together. So with those few words, good folk, thank you profoundly for your contribution. I just want to tell all of you that one of the things that we do, and Maria takes the lead, my colleague here, and Aaron supports us as well, we produce a monograph which has academic rigour about it, and this is going to be produced in English and Pitjantjatjara. And I'm excited about that. I don't quite know why I'm excited. I just am excited, as I was when I was on a planning conference with these 4 folk, and the 4 of them shared in Pitjantjatjara, Yankatjatjara, and then every now and again included me in. And somehow I kept connected. Just. Look at this lady. What a gorgeous twinkle. You know, kind of saying, you thought you kept connected, John? We were just playing. Anyhow. It's there. You can see it. Well, I'm going to get a lecture afterwards. Anyhow, just before we do close, we'd like to present you just with a small gift on behalf of we good folk at Flinders University and the Sidney Myer Chair. It's here with Maria now. So, Maria, do you want to walk over or do I come over? And I just want to present you with this. I hope you like it. I didn't ask you beforehand, and there's only one colour. You can have any colour you like, as long as it's black. Like Henry Ford in the motor car. Thank you very much for what you did for us tonight. Thank you. And young Sam? Why is he young Sam? Because I'm old John. Okay. So could we just show our thanks again? Could I just, before I invite you to supper, could we just have a straw vote, because we've got to set things up for tomorrow, of who might like to come along, is likely to come along, might like to come along to the seminar tomorrow? Okay, great. All right. My quick hand says about 25:30. That will be fantastic. It's here from 9 to 11. If you get here a few minutes earlier, fine. We look forward to having you. Thank you again for coming from the Four Corners and beyond to share in this night with us. Good evening.